Welcome everyone to our inaugural meeting of the Working Group on Nuclear Disarmament Education. I'm Agnes Niemark, a visiting scholar and the project coordinator at the Rep Institute for Peace and Conflict Studies here at Cornell. It's my pleasure to moderate the meeting today. Yesterday, Rebecca Slayton, the director of the Rep Institute, joined me in welcoming the participants and launching work of our group. Unfortunately, Rebecca is too busy in the evening. She has two small kids and she couldn't do it today. So, but she says hello to all of you, and she will join the project at some point. So first, I would like to thank you all for joining the project. We are very excited to have such a diverse group of participants, and we hope we will be able to learn from each other's experiences from different fields, academic, civil society, and others. And as I said, this first inaugural meeting is a rather spontaneous conversation. Some of us know each other and know about each other's, work and activities, but not everyone. So this is why we would like to start with everyone introducing themselves and introducing your work as it relates to nuclear disarmament. And also, I would like to hear at the beginning your spontaneous thoughts about what you think this diverse group of people could achieve as a group, as working together, exchanging our experiences. I don't want to prejudice the conversation, so I will start with answering these questions myself, so you know a little bit about my work and my ideas. And after I let you introduce yourself and tell me what you expect from this group, I will also summarize briefly our discussion from yesterday, and maybe we can have half an hour of open discussion, try to relate of what was discussed yesterday. As I promised earlier, also, we will share the recordings from the previous session. The recordings should be ready tomorrow, after tomorrow, so I will share everything between all the participants. And my plan is to summarize our meetings over summer and see, what could be our next steps. So we don't have a very clear idea how we will proceed with the group yet. I will summarize the meetings and see if we can create some kind of subgroups to have discussions about, details on particular issues. And also depending of the outcomes of our meetings. So let me just start by answering these two questions that I put in the chat for myself. So I joined the Rep Institute in 2014, and from the very beginning, I was very lucky because I started to participate in a research project on stability at lower nuclear numbers, directed by two wonderful veteran scholars, Professor Judith Repi and Katrin Kelleher. And I also work with Judith Repi, who is the former director of the Institute, on preserving the archive of Randall Forsberg, one of the leaders of the Freeze campaign. Judith Repi was on the board of the Institute that Randall Forsberg created in 1979. And when Randy died in 2007, Judith became, I think she was even the chair of the board at the time. Judith became a curator of the archival materials of Randall Forsberg and of the IDDS. So my work started with, on nuclear disarmament, started really with this archival work and helped me to understand the importance of the nuclear disarmament movements, especially of the Freeze campaign, but also learn a lot about grassroots organizing in the 1980s. And I learned a lot about what was happening on the campuses in the United States and how education, extracurricular education looked like in the 1980s. And over the last couple of years, I started my own projects. Some of them are oral history, some of them are documentary projects related to nuclear disarmament and education. And for this documentary project, I've been following closely since 2016 the ICANN campaign on ban the bomb and all the negotiations related to the ban treaty. I'm very happy, with the entry into force of the TPNW, and I believe this treaty provides an excellent platform to have some discussions about nuclear disarmament education, especially that this is a platform or forum open to various actors. We can all attend, the meetings of the state parties and hold the side events, which is a wonderful opportunity to have discussions on nuclear education. And especially the inclusion of communities affected by nuclear weapons and civil society involved in the education, I think makes this forum very attractive. So this is why my idea about, the final product of this group is to produce a special report on education that could be presented during the third meeting of the TPNW, state parties of TPNW. But I would like to hear your opinion, if you also believe this is the right forum. We had some controversy with some scholars during the first session, and some people believe that, presenting at TPNW meetings make this report basically oriented at advocacy as education. And not everybody was, happy with this idea, because, education could be understood as advocacy for disarmament or teaching of critical thinking about issues related to disarmament. So this is what I would like to say at the beginning, so you know where I stand or what I'm doing. And I will call maybe, your names as I have them on the list of participants, because that will make my work easy to make sure everybody can speak for a few minutes. Please keep your comments relatively short, 2-3 minutes, but we have probably up to 5 minutes per person since we are not so many. And maybe we keep the last half an hour, 20 minutes for a more open discussion. So let me start with Matthew Bolton. Matthew has a lot of experience with the TPNW and disarmament education. So let's start with you, Matthew.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you all, and thank you for the invitation to be here. I won't take long, except to say that I guess I would see my work as relating to nuclear disarmament advocacy and education and research. And for me, I don't really put hard lines between the three of them. I think those are only to support academics believing that they're objective when no one ever is.
Yeah.
So I see these as nested activities that, as a political scientist, I engage in politics all the time. Even if I'm analyzing politics, I'm also engaging in it. So I came into the world of nuclear disarmament through other disarmament processes. Notably, I started out my career working on landmine issues, and in the early 2000s in Bosnia and Iraq, and then later Afghanistan and Sudan. And then, sorry, I don't know what's stuck in my throat. And then via the Arms Trade Treaty negotiations in New York, began to be expanding out my interests and found my way into ICANN. And a lot of what I've focused on is the kind of addressing the humanitarian and environmental effects of weapons, starting with landmines, cluster munitions, and so on. So within the nuclear weapons field, I've focused more on gathering the data to help with the implementation of victim assistance and environmental remediation, advocating for that law. So I was on the team that got Articles 6 and 7 into the treaty. And also in my research essentially is about gathering that data from nuclear test affected places in the Pacific and beyond, but also researching pathways to nuclear disarmament progress. And I involve my students in all of that. So I bring students to the first committee in my I have a class on global politics of disarmament and arms control. Much of it is about nuclear issues, not all of it. I have been involved in the local level. I'm appointed by the New York City Council speaker to a local body that deals with New York City's nuclear weapons free zone. So I've involved students in the local politics of it too. And I think people learn through doing. They learn through action. They learn through observing the world around them. I think in a more compelling fashion, it draws them back into the theory, it draws them back into the research. They begin to care about it more because they've seen it with their own eyes. And so I really think you can't do good disarmament education except through engaging in disarmament, advocacy, politics, policy, and research. And so the result of that was that I felt like there wasn't enough people really pushing the disarmament education angle. And so Pace University, we have an International Disarmament Institute, of which I'm the co-director with my spouse, Emily Welty, have been coordinating statements to the first committee on disarmament education and youth and disarmament. And I suppose this gets to my response to your second question, which is I hope that this can become a broader conversation. We have been running these statements without much, we've been trying to consult broadly, but I feel like it's been kind of quiet, and I like it to be noisier. And I think I would like to thank SGI for really holding it up too for a long time. So I think I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you so much, Matthew. So let's move actually to Anna Ikeda, because Anna worked with you on some of the working papers that you presented within TPNW debates. So Anna, tell us about yourself and how you see the work of this group, how we can advance things from where they are today.
Yes, thank you so much, Agnes. And hi, everyone. Good to see some familiar faces and some new faces. And so I'm Anna Ikeda from Soka Gakkai International. I'm based in Las Vegas, Nevada. And I just want to apologize in advance. I have 2 kids behind me, and they like to engage in active conversations when I'm on the Zoom meeting. So if you hear that, I apologize. But I want to really thank you, Agnes, for really reaching out about this institute, and also Rep Institute for this initiative. As mentioned in your paper, my organization has been working on really advocating for the role of education in advancing disarmament, and especially within the TPNW context to promote the TPNW. And as you know, it was one of the things that we have advocated for during the TPNW negotiations, which is hard to believe it was 7 years ago. And also we continue to link education and TPNW in the MSP processes as well, as Matthew mentioned. But I agree, it's time for more collaboration and more coordination, to make more noise. So I think in that regard, I'm also truly appreciative of this working group, and really looking forward to contributing and also learning from each other. So as SGI, some of you may be familiar, we are a Buddhist organization, but we focus on education because as Buddhists, we believe that each person has a potential for peace, and we feel education is the way to activate the power. So, we use the term education in a very broad way. Sometimes it could be kind of categorized as awareness raising, and those activities are often at grassroots levels, spearheaded by our national or local Soka Gakkai Buddhist communities around the world. And they tend to use different tools like exhibitions, film screenings, lectures, But I think the common theme is, with the aim to kind of hold a space for public to not only learn, but also dialogue about these issues and really dig deeper. So one example that we had recently was, actually, some of you might have seen it at the 2MSP. We had some images of hibakusha from Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It kind of looked like a 3D image, although it's a picture. It's called lenticular technology. I have never heard this before. And each portrait is paired with some message from hibakusha. So I think it kind of gave more like a human face to those survivors' testimonies. And so they hosted 52 of those portraits in Tokyo from mid-March to end of May, and it attracted 20,000 visitors and elicited some strong emotional responses. So one of the visitors was this 12-year-old girl, who was actually new to the topic and, who was really initially shocked and almost tearful. But by the end, she revisited the exhibit and wrote down some messages and decided to share them in a school essay. And also another college student decided to return multiple times with friends. So I think, it really resonated with young people, bringing the issue and bringing, I think, the humanity of the survivors to them. So that's just one example. But I think in terms of this group, I really feel education is all aspects of the TPNW's implementation. So, not only the universalization, but also, as Matthew mentioned, Articles 6 and 7. I think, we need to really highlight the voices of affected communities and, let the world know that people have suffered from nuclear weapons, not only use, but testing, development, production in so many different communities. And I think to strengthen Articles 6 and 7, we need more awareness raising. There was a new working group created on deterrence. And I think, again, that's another one that we need much stronger public education to really refute the myth of deterrence, that it's not a reliable security mechanism. So I'm not, sure what would be a solution, but I think, just collecting different efforts that people are engaging and coordinating and uplifting each other, and, figuring out how such educational activities can implement TPNW in multifaceted way, I think would be really helpful for me.
Okay, thank you, Anna, for this initial comments. Hiro Miyazaki is next on my list.
Thank you. Thank you, Agnes. I'm Hiro Miyazaki from Northwestern University. I have met or know many of you on the screen, and I'm kind of relatively a kind of newcomer to nuclear disarmament conversation, but I have been doing some anthropological research in Nagasaki for some time. So around various forms of peace activism, and also particularly the Catholic Church's engagement with atomic bombs legacy and nuclear disarmament. But currently I'm engaged in two kind of related projects, or both kind of research, have a research and kind of action components, but inspired by the TPNW entering into force. I've been really focusing on efforts to broaden the conversation about nuclear weapons. I'm an anthropologist, so that's like, that's what we do, broadening things. So, and one of the focuses I have developed is on the role of cities, city councils, mayors, and other local government entities in the politics of nuclear weapons. And this project was inspired by the commitment the mayors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki have long made to their international advocacy through the UN frameworks. But since last year with a grant from the Carnegie Corporation of New York, I've been doing a very large scale study of the politics of nuclear weapons through the lens of city councils in the US, various US cities, including New York City. So I'm going to come to you, Matthew, soon. And I've actually talked to other people involved who are involved in the New York City resolution. The one kind of area that will connect this project to education is that the one reason that I'm focused on the role of cities is that I kind of see that's the kind of one locus where broadening of conversation is happening. That's where nuclear weapons issues are linked to various local concerns that are specific to localities. Like in Chicago, a couple of years ago, resolution was passed at the city council, and that explicitly linked nuclear weapons to the history of racism and in the city, and many resolutions adopted in Pacific Northwest, where I was traveling around for the last few weeks. The resolutions really referenced, drew attention to the local presence of people affected by nuclear tests and other nuclear legacies, such as Marshallese populations, etc. So I've been really inspired by those efforts to expand the local conversations and educate local populations and city council members and mayors, etc., but also document locally specific nuclear legacies in this very succinct form of documents called resolutions. So I am sort of writing a series of papers about the kind of expanded vision of how these resolutions may have impact in terms of local level education. And as a collectivity, these resolutions will actually give all of us a very nuanced and rich picture of the very wide distribution of nuclear legacies, different nuclear legacies throughout this country. So that's one project. And the other project focuses on the Catholic Church. And that's more, I mean, I also do research on the historical role Catholic Church has played, and kind of their position has shifted a number of times. But I'm working very closely with some bishops here in the States and in Japan, particularly Archbishop Wester of Santa Fe and Archbishop Etienne of Seattle and the Bishop of Hiroshima and Archbishop Nagasaki. And those four bishops recently formed a partnership for a world without nuclear weapons. And I've been basically serving as a kind of, I don't know how I am, but kind of logistical support / interpreter. I don't know. When they travel, I purchase tickets for them, etc. So, but I through that kind of very mundane kind of engagement with that high level conversation within the church, I'm kind of I'm seeing how difficult it is to educate the Catholic, like also religious people in a church on nuclear disarmament, and there are all kinds of hurdles. There are all kinds of hurdles across the Pacific, and I'm kind of seeing that as an opportunity for education through a kind of parish and diocese level conversations we are studying. So like, just to, in a nutshell, my focus is on really the kind of broadening of research, education, and politics of nuclear weapons, and through city level engagement, as well as Catholic churches engagement and transnational kind of engagement with this issue. And I'm really looking forward to participating in this project, partly because I used to be at Cornell and I used to be at Inaugural Center, directing the Inaugural Center. And that's when also the kind of Rugby Institute's relationship with the RECNA started too. So I'm very happy to be part of this project. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Hiro. And I really believe these two projects that you just mentioned about the role of the cities and also role of the Catholic Church could make a great contribution to our work. I hope you have some initial findings in the fall that you could share with us, because, you know, we all know about important educational role that the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki play. But it would be nice to look beyond, you know, cities when the bombings happen. And in the US, you know, there are so many initiatives at the city levels when it comes to resolution, when supports to the PNW or back from the Brink campaign. So it would be great to have some initial statistics and understanding to what, you know, how big this movement at the local level is, and what kind of impact the cities can have. And, you know, probably it will be great if we include some recommendations related to this kind of local level initiatives. So I'm looking forward to, you know, seeing your initial findings or first publications on these two projects. And I think that would be a great contribution in the fall. Okay, Elisa is next on my list.
Calling in from Malaysia, so it's about 8:50 in the morning. My name is Alyssa. I'm currently the head advisor of a youth movement in Malaysia called Malaysian Youth Diplomacy. We have a campaign called Disarmament, which I co-founded, working on building a generation of youth who can actually work as disarmament negotiators. So that's more on the weekend. On the weekday, I'm recently graduated with a bachelor degree, which my thesis documented the Malaysian foreign policy on nuclear. It now becomes a handbook for Malaysian diplomats because I documented the historical strategies as well as our role as not only a non-nuclear weapon state, but also who have been affected by nuclear fallout back in the Cold War. As well, I'm advising the Malaysian government, particularly the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Ministry of Defense, on CBRN. So, but my main focus on CBRN is more on the nuclear and radiological. I have previously attended or represented Malaysia as a UN Youth Delegate back in 2022, and I covered a number of disarmament portfolio, as well as attended the last MSP for TPNW. At the moment, I'm a part of the UNODA Youth Leader Fund for a world without nuclear weapons. So that's like a bullet list of the things that I've worked on. Particularly in education, I've never got the chance to work deeply in that, because in Malaysia, unfortunately, a lot of us don't really know our history. So that's what I wanted to bring forward, is that a lot of people, when we talk about nuclear fallout, basically these items are those who are directly impacted. For example, the countries that like Hiroshima, Nagasaki, or even those who had nuclear testing. But there are also other countries who are not, we'll say, the main direct, I'll say the direct impacts are not mainly to them, but they experience, and how can we actually mitigate that? And I think another part where I can also contribute is more on the foreign policy element of it, because I think at the end of the day, at least reflecting from the last TPNW meeting, we had like a post-council meeting back in Malaysia, looking from all the working papers and the conversations that was raised inside the meeting. A number of the items are really good because it brings direction, but we don't really know how to localize it. Because first, we don't even have enough capacity, or even some of the items are very vague. So I think that's an element that we can look into when it comes to formulating this working output.
Okay.
So going back to the question, what would I like to see we accomplish together? I wouldn't go very highly about it, but I want to see some sort of like a really good baseline of curriculum that can be implemented and it's future proof. I really like how the participants are very diverse. We are not only looking at global north, but also some global south representatives outside of Japan that can provide some intakes. But I also hope there are more elements than typical nuclear disarmament education, looking at not only like the doctrines of it, because that's the main perpetrator of why we have nuclear weapons, but also like, as mentioned earlier, the humanitarian, scientific, and even like the nuclear justice element of it, and how we can implement it in the local level. But at the same time, I advocated this in the last MSP, is that when we look at a disarmament, I hope that this conversation is not very silo, because oftentimes you only advocate or even learn about it through one angle, like for example, learning it from the first committee or MPT or TPNW. I hope this conversation can also expand more into like other forums, especially like environment, where we have COP, and engage with more people to understand that it's not a silo thing, especially for Malaysia. Nobody really cares about nuclear because we don't really have nuclear weapons, and those who were affected is basically our late grandfathers and grandmothers. So we don't really have anything to say, or like there's a stake at the moment. So by incorporating like environment or even like youth peace security or women peace security, there are more angles of participation for us to learn. So yeah, that's all for me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Elisa, for your comments. These issues were also raised yesterday, that we should avoid siloing, just nuclear issues and nuclear teaching, that we should relate, issues related to nuclear disarmament, non-proliferation, to other risks, for instance, emerging technologies, environmental issues, injustices related to nuclear weapons, so we can broaden the field and bring more people together and have this education done in a different way. All right, let me pass now. So maybe we wait still with Jonathan and Mariko because you participated in the first meeting. So I will move to Tatsu Suzuki now, and I don't know if Keiko wants also to say a few words today, or if it's just you. I will check. Huh?
Thank you. My name is Tatsu Suzuki. I'm currently a professor at the Research Center for Nuclear Weapons Abolition, Nagasaki University, RECNA. My original background is nuclear engineering. So I'm basically interested in the link between civilian nuclear energy and nuclear disarmament non-proliferation. But at the RECNA, currently we are working, Keiko and I are working on the project to publish a book on nuclear weapon free zone in Northeast Asia. And in that book, we are trying to identify the alternative security policy to nuclear, depending on nuclear deterrence. So I quite actually echo with Anna how to educate the public and policymakers the risk of nuclear deterrence. That's my main goal right at this moment. And in terms of expectation of this group, my personal interest in the two things. One is how to educate the scientists. And social responsibility of the scientists is very important in these days, particularly with the emerging technologies. And in Japan, mostly in Japan, probably, that the scientists are not interested in the security issues. So how to educate scientists that their work is how related to the security issues. That's my main concern. Second expectation is that, again, how to educate the policymakers, particularly the politicians. They are so ignorant in terms of probably many areas, but particularly in the nuclear disarmament. And they tend to depend on the bureaucrats and the bureaucrats tend to stick with the traditional concept of security. So I think this group may, have a, if we have a good opportunity to have education to the policymaker, that would be great. So I recommend that in addition to the TPNW, we should publish a paper, working paper at the NPT, and that we could have a side event in both TPNW and NPT to publish our output. Thank you. And probably Keiko will add something. She is working on the nuclear disarmament education for herself.
Thank you, Tetsu. Keiko, would you like to tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about your work, your previous
Okay.
work, and how it relates to disarmament? And what would you expect this group to achieve, accomplish?
Sure.
Together? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to join here. And I'm so sorry for being late. My name is Keiko Nakamura from RECNA with Tatsu. And then, I've been with RECNA last, I think 12 or 13 years, since its initiation. And then, I have been engaged in the various programs related to giving the young people, especially young people, but, including all people in a different ages group, learning about the, devastation of the Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and also how to link it to the current, the world with nuclear weapons. So, actually the reason, that I have been engaged in the disarmament education issue is not only just, me being in Nagasaki, but also I have been really quite, I would say, curious, because that, as you all know, the Japanese government is one of the leading, actors to promote the peace education in all over the world, promoting the statement, in the UN conferences and other places. But as you know, Japan has been under nuclear umbrella of the US and then, refusing to join the TPNW, even joining to the discussion.
As
So,
observer, is Japan an observer of TPNW? Or
no,
not even
never
an
been, never. So as you know that some of the NATO country have, already joined as the observer, but Japan refused to do that, so far for last 2 times. So, so that's why I kept feeling such a huge gap, being as the leader promoting the nuclear disarmament education, and at the same time, promoting or advocating that how the nuclear weapon is important to protect its own security. So I think it's a huge dilemma existing, but I don't know, the education could be a key to solve or kind of filling the gap in some way. So I am having hope to promoting that public education so that people realize such the dilemma, and then maybe we can kind of not just only accusing the way the government is doing, but maybe this is going to be the good opportunity to that everyone consider that that this situation is something that we have to do. It's related to something to all of the people. This also lead to my other concern about the future of Nagasaki and probably Hiroshima peace education. So the all schools, from the primary school to the secondary school, the high school, and then in university, in some cases, in Hiroshima and Nagasaki are quite spending long time, giving the opportunity for the young people to learn about the inhumanity of the nuclear weapons. I mean, inhumanity of atomic bombing experiences. So the many young people has opportunity to hear, to listen to the hibakusha testimony when they are childhood, and also they had chance in Nagasaki, all 10-year-old, 5th grade elementary school student had a chance to visit the Atomic Bomb Museum. That's the regulation in the Nagasaki prefecture even. But this is the point. But when I had like, let's say the survey, to the university student who were born and brought up in these areas, they are so pessimistic about the possibility that nuclear weapon will be abolished in the future, or they even do not know like how we can achieve to that stage. I mean, so I would say the pieces, I can see the huge gap again between the peace education, what we call peace education, and disarmament education, which is supposed to be provided for the people, which really empower young people to, to give a power to them, to power and the knowledge, and then the understanding, like, they are capable of achieving a world free from nuclear weapon. So what I have been proposing is like, I have been working on is creating curriculums and also materials, educational materials, and then giving, I mean, like, so yeah, that point is not only just providing knowledge, but, what I have been struggling is how I can motivate them, how they can feel that the nuclear issue is something like very much abstract and far away from their daily lives, but it's something to do with them. And then they have a right and they have a power to choose their future, safer and much better, peaceful future, So yeah, almost like every week since this June and July is a season in Nagasaki that all schools, especially the public school, elementary school, and then junior high had the peace education weeks, or month even, before the anniversary of the bombing in August 9th. But it's all could, it's more likely being like occasional things, not like annual. I mean, like, throughout the year. So it's more like a spontaneous one, and then not like systematic and then concrete program. So what I'm trying to do is like connecting our accumulated knowledge from the global effort on the peace, the peace and then disarmament education toward like, and localize it so that we can empower the Nagasaki school. And many people in the world believe that, we are doing good in Nagasaki in terms of the disarmament education, which is not. We really need better disarmament education, and then we need to learn from the global effort. And then related to the TPNW, I have been very much, impressed by the effort to connecting, finding a linkage between like environmental issue, human rights issue, and gender issue to, to the nuclear disarmament issue, right? And also, when we talk about the inhumanity of the nuclear weapon, we always see not only the Hiroshima, Nagasaki, but we see so much, so many other elements, such as the testing victims, also like other nuclear accident and then everything. So those kind of viewpoint perspective is also lacking, not sufficient in the Japanese peace education. So I try to like, import, not export only, from Hiroshima, Nagasaki, but also import and then making a clear linkage with that. So the one thing I maybe suggest, or something I would say I have been struggling to creating more effective curriculum on the disarmament education is how can we involve the people with the region, which, for example, like the South Korea, China, and then other some Asian countries which believe that atomic bombing is something liberate them, something, save them from the Japanese occupation, So yeah, Miyazaki sensei must be the expert on those kind of issue. But when I, try to run some kind of like, educational program in Nagasaki, bringing students from other Asian countries, especially from South Korea and China, it's a huge challenge. Like, how we can let them to understand that the inhumanity of the nuclear weapon is also it's related to the history, but it's not nationalistic point of view. It's not like, we, the Nagasaki people, are victims and then, or something like that. But it's just so hard to let them to, understand that the nuclear weapon is our universal problem. It's always attached to the more like nationalistic, like domestic kind of sentiment. So how can I, settle those kind of problems? So that's one thing. Yeah, and also the in the US too, the believing, still many people believe that dropping the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombing is, save so many people, not only the soldiers in the United States, but also save the people in Japan too. So those kind of education is still prominent in the United States, as far as I understand. Although the survey result about the evaluation of the atomic bombing, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, how they can justify is has been changing, right? According to the opinion poll, but still, from my experiences, the people's mindset has not changed that much somehow. So my question, my concern is therefore, engage in the TPNW is of course very important, but also how can we reach out to the public education in the other countries? How can we make a connection with the actual teachers, in the schools, and then let them know what we have been thinking and what have we been doing. So I think the outreach effort is the huge challenge for us and then for everyone, I think. Yeah. So reporting, making a good report is of course very important. It's a good step, but sometimes I see even the very good written important report has not reach out to the people who needs it. So I think we should think about how we can reach out after the TPNW conference. Yeah, sorry for the long comment. Yeah, that's from me now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Keiko. So yes, a lot of issues that we also discussed during the first session. And, of course, the United Nations ODA, Office for Disarmament Affairs, play an important role building some kind of partnerships and networks that, could bring together countries, in particular regions and sub-regions, to improve education and sort of work between educators, trained educators. So we discussed that also at the United Nations level, and definitely that should be considered. To respond to Tatsu's question about how social responsibility, could be taught to scientists who work in nuclear weapons field, I think I will pass now to Mike to Jonathan Alston, because Jonathan, I think you will be working on ethical issues when it comes at least to physics, right? And that might relate a little bit to what Tatsu said, was that nuclear technologies and ethics, right? So I would love to hear about what you are thinking about, what kind of resources could be produced, or how we could teach scientists about social responsibility and ethics.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, I think that's a conversation that I'd love to have with Tatu, because so with the Physicists Coalition for Nuclear Threat Reduction, this is an organization that's putting together, professional physicists to think, to kind of try to amplify and combine our voices together in mostly advocacy, I would say. But more recently, the coalition has been thinking about this pipeline into weapons research and especially early career folks. So that's part of what I'm working with. So there's a few people in the coalition who are physicists that you may already know them, I'm not sure. But there's quite a few people who, and my background is in PER, physics education research. And so there's some people in physics education research who are actually investigating how to have these conversations and how to effectively help mostly students, in this case, in the sort of more formal education realm, how to help students feel like they have a voice and the sense of self-efficacy, which is a concern. So there are courses that exist. And so part of what I'll be doing in my fellowship with the coalition this year is trying to get a synthesis of what those materials look like, and I guess where we can go from there. I hope that answers the question.
At least that's a good start, I hope. You know, if we can have these resources visible at some point, and you know, people, we can direct people at least to what has been done in this area.
Yeah, and there are some, especially the Princeton School on Science and Global Security, which some of you may already be connected with again, has published a resource letter for physicists, and also has some educational materials on their website.
Yes. All right, so last on my list, but not least, is Mariko Komatsu. Mariko joined us yesterday. So please, Mariko, introduce yourself to the participants that join us today, and tell us if you have some new ideas, you know, after participating also in the previous session.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Mariko. Good to see you, some of you, and nice to meet you. My background is in education. My originally trained in kindergarten, elementary school education in Canada after I was born and raised in Hiroshima. And then I also majored in my master's degree, the curriculum development in human rights education, social studies education, as well as in social psychology in radiation disaster affected area of Fukushima. So I have always been interested how we go beyond psychic numbing of the disaster, because as Keiko Sensei mentioned, that we've been dosed, maybe overdosed in a way, with the narratives of hibakusha in Hiroshima from the young age. And I am receiving many visitors to Hiroshima because I'm based in Hiroshima and Tokyo right now, half and a half. Working in an NGO that deals with sustainable development goals right now, since this month. But as I receive many visitors to Hiroshima, you know, they come all the way and they see the effects, the humanitarian impacts of Hiroshima, and some of them go to Nagasaki, of course, and some of them have visited various other places like Auschwitz and, you know, those areas who's been affected. And I'm very curious how we go beyond and make linkage to the other issues is one, other interests is one, and like many people are saying, other stakeholders who are not necessarily interested in the issue of nuclear weapons. So I think that some of the keywords that I have heard in this meeting thus far is, it wasn't so articulated in the first one just yet. I think it has been crystallizing, and Agnes, you have been extracting it very well, I think, is, you know, those are social responsibility and different stakeholders is one, and human rights and ethics and all that. Another aspects that I have been very quite aware is that everybody dumps problems in education. Whenever they have a problem in their own domains, they dump solution to education as if education would solve everything. And they do so hidden as well. They have the certain directions. The critical thinking is another direction that the people want students to follow. And without being very articulate of their intention, they hide the message in the education attempts. And I want to raise question about that. So say nuclear disarmament education is quite clear in a way that it is for nuclear disarmament. So being very articulate of the position of the education, educationists is one of the ways to really open up the floor for those who participated in this forum of education as students or the recipients of the program, and maybe conduct the very democratic, if I use the word correctly, conversation about the issues. And I think it can be a very key. I believe that based on my past activities in Hiroshima University, I'm hoping to continue the different aspects I'm writing for it, is that we have created an archive of 10 peace educators in Hiroshima, how they conducted their peace education or atomic bomb education in their professional lives in Hiroshima. So they always connected their own interests and their domain of interest and expertise with the message of hibakusha, which is very important to convey the first-hand accounts of nuclear weapons humanitarian impacts. But I am very interested how to be articulate and how to reach out to really broaden not just the passing on the knowledge that I think some of you mentioned, but how to make it applicable and how to make it current and how to make it transcendent to the other issues, so that we don't siloing ourselves, sort of hierarchying at the very high, the issue of nuclear weapons and nuclear disarmament. My current engagement, I think I'm calling myself as a sort of floating interpreter. I interpret in Hiroshima and other places, Japanese and English, especially the issues of education, nuclear weapons, and Catholic church as well. I think I will be your receiving end, like Sensei, in Hiroshima from this summer and on about this partnership. I've visited this, U.S. side, the nuclear national parks, national sites of Los Alamos and the other places a couple of times with the Hiroshima University funding, and really surprised to see the currentness. I should find a better words to it. That's the how we can really connect this desire to develop and drop the nuclear weapons with the current technology developments. We want to have a better cell phone. We want to have a better TV, and all these things. The search for the science and the development is found so many places in this discourse of nuclear weapon development. I think it's something that we should take it, individually and connect with today's problem. Maybe I think so because I met with my husband in the science and technology studies seminar, and then his majors in philosophy and all that. But I think it make it relevant. It is a special topic that needs attention, that's for sure, and especially the accounts of victims for sure. But then we also have to universalize in a way by individualizing the discourse of presenting this such humongous topic of nuclear weapons. So that's it.
Okay, thank you, Marika. So I was hoping these initial comments will be a bit shorter and we finish, before 9 o'clock to have some discussion. But if you're okay to stay another 15 to 20 minutes, so we have some exchange after this initial, introductions and sort of thoughts, I would like to just tell you briefly about our discussions yesterday, because I think we could maybe relate to that and it maybe structure our conversation a little bit better. So the discussion looked like today, everybody brought something to the table, and at the beginning you don't see yet how this cooperation between us can happen. But then, when I digested the conversation after yesterday 2 hours, I think we discussed 3 main issues or addressed 3 questions. Teaching who? So we were trying to think about, what kind of audience we would like to target, because we can't, in our group cannot, I think, discuss educating everyone. So, we could orient our efforts at broadening the audience in general in nuclear disarmament education. For some people, this is important, that some people just don't hear about nuclear weapons, especially youth, marginalized communities, high schoolers. So going towards these audiences that are quite young, so they are exposed at least to the issues of nuclear weapons. So we were discussing in general, one issue, if you could think about, is teaching who. This group, should we just address youth as our main target audience, or maybe we should discuss education in general, education of educators. That could be another thing, preparing some toolboxes for educators to reach this kind of broader audiences. Should we think about a campaign which will address the general public? This is another possibility. And then again, when it comes to target, is the TPNW again the best forum for presenting and discussing our outcomes? As I told you, when it comes to the audience, some of the participants were worried about if we present our reports to the countries that are already part of the TPNW, that might be problematic, because really the main audiences that we would like to reach are based in the countries that are armed nuclear weapons countries or states. So this is the question: if TPNW is indeed the best forum for our work, or maybe we should present a report that will be submitted to the Secretary General, this biannual report on education, maybe some other forum that we didn't discuss yet. So teaching who, that was the first part of conversation. Teaching what is in general the content, how to broaden the content, address issues that are not directly related to nuclear weapons, but, as we mentioned, nuclear injustices, gender in disarmament, environmental impacts, and not isolating nuclear weapons, but also presenting them in context of other risks like emerging technologies, climate change, and other issues. Also, teaching what a lot of excellent, platforms and resources have been already created and could be used, but they are known only to people who are really engaged in education and studying nuclear weapons. So how to make the existing platforms, that some initiatives that I mentioned in my discussion paper, more visible, more adaptable to different audiences, because I think we have to use all the existing initiatives, already, just to improve their visibility and then build on them. And then I think the discussion that was the most controversial yesterday was about teaching how. So this distinction that I mentioned at the beginning of our discussion about, advocacy as education, or education as advocacy, as it is used by the United Nations and TPNW, in this understanding that this is teaching for disarmament, and we should be quite open about that, versus, teaching at the high school levels, where people, academics that we had on our panel yesterday said they don't even name their courses as teaching of disarmament, because that creates some kind of prejudice that this is an ideological approach, and they, have certain goals, and they don't present this as a neutral issues and an issue that could be, taught and bring critical thinking among their students. So they avoid calling their courses disarmament courses, and they believe if we produce a report which is for TPNW, it can't be used in the higher education as something that will be recommended to people working with students. So some other questions related to teaching how, what it takes for educational initiatives to be impactful. I think some of you mentioned that, how to create this kind of engagement, what it takes for educators to be heard in general and to have an effect that they would like to achieve, how to develop knowledge and tools for students to think critically. So I think this was the 3 areas that we discussed, and I will open this for maybe 20 minutes of discussion among us. If you could just press the raise hand so we see who wants to speak, then I'll be passing voice around. Especially the target audience, I think it's important for us to start our conversation. Yeah, Elisa, please go ahead.
I'll try to be brief so I can give others. I think for the first question, I believe it could be general in public because I see this not only like some sort of like a time frame where we need to kill it within like 2 years. We can just make it in a bigger like structure, but like along the years we can narrow it down to specific targets. So maybe for let's say we're going to launch it next year, then the subsequent years we can do it more accordingly. Because I think if we just focus on the youth, there'll be like a disconnect for like intergenerational discourse and things like that, which I might expect to happen. For teaching what, I think something that we should also focus on is that as much as we want for disarmament, we should also expect the worst case scenario that things might happen. In Malaysia, we do have like CBRN classes, but that's for like officers, not for the general public. So as country that is prone to natural disasters, we don't really know how to handle it. I think that's a key tool for all countries to learn. I think that's a non-negotiable and people wouldn't really shut it down at the first fight. But at the same time, the content, like I mentioned earlier, should go from not only the theoretical parts of it, but also the effects. So I think people could understand. Then going back to your question of like how to not make it very politicized. At least in Malaysia, how most of the teaching goes, we utilize in the form of security learning. So fortunately, I'm grateful that the country is not very narrow-minded. We look at security in a bigger way, not only like traditional weapons, but also looking at human security, environmental security. So I think in that case, a lot of the countries are open to discussing about disarmament. And I think it ties back why the rationale of certain weapons exists in the first place. So it looks more seamless and does promote disarmament at the end of the day. In terms of engagement, I personally think we should make it like an open-ended thing because in some countries, maybe certain like lectures or theory-based ways could be very helpful, but in certain countries, it might not be. Same goes to demographic. But I think it should also incorporate a level of like, I came across this term called like tabletop exercises where people simulate things and it can be very helpful. I'm not really sure how we can simulate, but I think there are certain efforts that has been done to simulate how like Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombing would happen if it's a modern day. And I think that type of visual impact can really help for people. Yeah, so I think that's so far my thoughts. I think for further, I could just email you or share it in the group. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So Keiko is next. Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Just briefly, your second question, I think about venue, where we should present the report. And then, of course, the TBNW is the excellent opportunity, venue to discuss further in more depth. But I think, in order to reach out, NPT, preparatory committee and also review conference will be better, because the, NPT final report in 2010 and then the past one have agreed to promote the disarmament and the non-proliferation education, so that has been already agreed. But as far as I understand, not that many countries really engaged in the actual concrete program. So, all countries under the NPT, they agree to do that, but actually they do not know how to do it. So, in order to fill the gap, they reach out to those countries to just put your hands on, to the actual program. The NPT could be better. And also, in order to discuss the issue, I think some of you mentioned that, how the disarmament education, how we teach like the security issues, like how that relying on the nuclear deterrence is the undermining our security. That is something we really want to providing more concrete information to the government officials and also the people gathering at NPT conferences. So that could be much better. And then I think in the NPT, almost every meeting, they agree. It's because of the Japanese government, but they agree with the some statement with the 70 or 80 some countries agreed on like promoting the nuclear disarmament. So at least the nuclear disarmament is one of the big focus for them. So yeah, that's one of the reason. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mariko. Matthew, would you like to come next?
Yeah, I just wanted to speak briefly to forum and what I think we can present to first committee, to TPNW, to NPT, RevCon. I don't think it matters. I think it matters just on the simple level that speaking to the TPNW is actually a useful space for having conversations about nuclear weapons that's not dominated by states that have them or are allied with them. And I think that creates a kind of like useful space for normalizing the idea of nuclear disarmament, which I cannot push back harder against this idea of nuclear disarmament education being ideological. Yeah, sure, but it's the first couple of resolutions of the General Assembly it's a long-standing principle of international law that we pursue, general and complete disarmament under international control. It is the official policy of the United States government to pursue a world free of nuclear weapons. Like all these, the discipline of philosophy means love of knowledge. We don't ask philosophers to also teach ignorance, right? But that would be a balanced approach. Ignorance studies and the love of knowledge. Like all our disciplines are, on some level, driven by normative values, at least a value of information and a value of analysis and critical education. And so I think it's fine. It's in the title. And I think making it muddying the water by talking about other things, I think makes it difficult for people to know what it's talking about and difficult to respond to. I'd say that in terms of just briefly on forum, within the TPNW, there's a bit of a politics that we'll have to navigate, which is that many people don't like disarmament education being placed in the universalization bucket, because they see universalization as something that is about trying to get states to join the treaty, and that disarmament education is not necessarily that. And they don't, a lot of people within ICANN, for instance, don't want money that should be directed at getting states to join the treaty to be directed to education that won't do that. And so we have to be somewhat careful about the linking of universalization, because it will annoy some of our allies on this.
Matthew,
I don't think we need to, because it's in the preamble.
Yeah, can I just ask you a question as somebody who is an insider a bit to the processes of the TPNW? Do you think that it would be useful for our group to involve some of the member states that have been the most active when it comes to education so far. I'm thinking about Mexico, that usually produce some kind of report for Secretary General, maybe Kiribati, Malaysia, countries that participated in some workshops devoted to education. Would that be in our interest to have some kind of honorary guest, for instance, when we organized in-person workshop? Or you think it's better to produce the report first and then try to involve some states that might be the most interested in the issues of education? What would be your advice on this?
I think either way, they both have their disadvantages and advantages. I think if you invite states in early, they'll try and control it. So I think it's better to kind of figure out what we think and what we're doing before we invite states. Even Mexico will, off the record, I guess I shouldn't say this, but there are some states that might try to control things if you invite them early, and I won't say which ones. That said, I think you can always invite them to be a part of the conversation later, and maybe to host a panel, right? Or to respond to it, or respond to a draft or something like that.
Okay, thank you. Anna?
Yes, thank you so much for this discussion and also sharing the summary of the first meeting. Just to piggyback on what Matthew said about kind of this dilemma or sensitivity around education sometimes within the campaigner community is we don't want also states to say, oh, we're doing education and that's enough. You know, that's kind of their universalization effort. You know, we want them to definitely go more in terms of signing the treaty, ratifying the treaty. So sometimes, you know, it can be kind of a convenient excuse for some of the entities. And, you know, definitely that's not our intent here, but I think it can be used that way. So there's always that kind of concern. But I'm just wondering, I think, you know, questions you asked, Agnes, they were interesting, but I kept on wondering then what is the overall aim or the purpose of this group? Because especially for me, one of the interests for me to join this initiative was, you know, to really link education in the implementation of the TPNW. But I understand that some people may have hesitations for different reasons, especially if they're academics. So, but I think being very clear about what we are trying to achieve together would help us answer these questions, because education, disarmament education is such a big topic and it can really mean anything. So I think we can't resolve the world, all the problems, right? So all education can be the solution, like Mariko said, for everything. But I think if we can kind of narrowly define what is it that we can challenge together. I mean, I see that we have so much expertise and experience and passion just in this room, and I can imagine in the other one too. So I'm definitely seeing you know, potential and exciting opportunity. So I just want to make sure that you know, we benefit from this group of such amazing talented people and accomplish something meaningful together. But I'm not quite sure, you know, what we're trying to achieve together.
We are definitely trying to work this out, you know, and that was a similar discussion in the first session. What was, I think, important, what Vincent Intondi said in the first session, is that we don't want to produce a report for the academics, because it is very difficult to achieve a systemic change in education. You know, I'm talking about institution of higher education or you know, K to 12. So I think our role is mostly at the level of extracurricular education, advocacy education, things that can be achieved, I think, outside this main institutional framework. And this is where probably we could move things forward. And as you said, I can see your child. So probably we will have to narrow our work to, you know, some kind of recommendations that are meaningful and feasible and can advance things, instead of producing report that will not have any use. And so we will try, I will try to summarize our discussion and think about the next steps, probably trying to make some kind of subgroups that can reflect more deeply on particular issues. But, first I wanted to have a feeling of the group and who might be, or how we can use expertise of particular people discussing, issues that we can build on, and we can make some recommendations that are clear and helpful. So you will see that this discussion was also taking place in the first session. Is there anybody else? We have another few minutes until 9:30. If you would like to add something. Okay. Oh, yes, Hiro, would you?
I think so this conversation is very, very helpful, and I think we should use the TPNW as a platform for this conversation. I mean, that's going to be, I think, really an important, very inclusive, open-ended platform. So so that having but I'm more kind of little concerned about sort of the ultimate goal, right? I mean, I think, I'm kind of currently focusing on US cities, and there are, like, I see lots of opportunities as well as limitations in terms of the possibility for formalizing, I mean, kind of including at least one lesson on nuclear disarmament in like high school history courses or social studies courses. I mean, that's not, because no one, I mean, students are not learning anything about nuclear weapons or nuclear policy beyond Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And so this is a really a problem for all of us, where we would like to kind of move the US towards somewhere. So I'm working on a kind of local initiative to just develop kind of first extracurricular kind of activity focused on nuclear disarmament at the local high school. And then, but I'm having my kind of just one lesson plan on nuclear issues to be considered for inclusion in high school history curriculum. So what I'm saying is kind of, I mean, I think each country has its own opportunities and limitations. I think, as Keiko mentioned, I think, we all know that peace education in Nagasaki is much more robust than peace education in this country, in the States, but that has its own problems. And we would like to learn from what Hiroshima and Nagasaki have achieved, but the kind of translation process will be very difficult, very difficult. And I think US, the kind of this whole issue of nuclear disarmament is very polarizing, and it's very extremely important to make it presented as a bipartisan issue that requires lots of kind of nuanced framings, whereas kind of nuclear justice issues have a kind of slightly wider appeal. I think it could be a kind of bipartisan issues. I mean, particularly in some regions in the States where, like, Marshallese have settled, or there are lots of Native Americans or others who have been affected by nuclear tests. And in those places, I think it could be a much more nuclear justice issue can be presented as a bipartisan issue, but that does not necessarily kind of lead to nuclear abolition or nuclear disarmament. So there are lots of kind of complexities, and I, as an anthropologist, I think, universalization and propagation of this whole commitment is important, but at the same time, I think we also need to sort of think about how to localize this issue in a way that is really compelling to people, right? I mean, because we need to change them and educate them and give them an opportunity to think about this whole issue. So I'm kind of interested in how to kind of localize nuclear disarmament education. And so that may be something
Yes.
some of you may be interested.
No, I think this is a very good point, Hiro, when it comes to broadening audiences, but you can't sometimes broaden them from centralized ways. You have to find ways to reach the audiences and engage them. The engagement is the problem. So, a lot of examples were made, like maybe, working at the city levels could help to create some curricula, bring them to schools. That's just one example. We mentioned also how arts and exhibitions about nuclear disarmament, TPNW, can quickly educate huge numbers of people. I brought this example of Senza Atomica, an organization in Italy that within a couple of years presented, an exhibition across Italy, educating 80,000 students of different age. So I think when we think about broadening the audience and building educational tools and thinking in the sense of not only educating but trying to engage these people at a younger age, I think we can be more specific of what we could recommend coming from our different experiences, participation in different initiatives. I'm sure we have some ideas what can work, but what we have seen already that is working. So that will be my idea, that in general we will try to narrow, of course, the purpose of this report to just a couple of issues and maybe just start the conversation, because we won't be able to do much more than recommend certain steps that should be implemented by various stakeholders and actors. I don't think the group can create tools within a couple of months. That's not something that we can achieve, but we could recommend different actions to different actors. What could be improved at the level of the United Nations? Perhaps they could be leading in building sort of new types of networks that will make certain platforms and initiatives more visible. Because, as I said, there is a lot of good resources that are spread between different institutions, and people just don't know about them. So for me, it is definitely about some practical steps and also about implementation of the TPNW. Because, we want to also involve, of course, the communities affected by the nuclear weapons and learn from the leaders, from these groups, how we can use their knowledge, how we could use, artistic work as part of knowledge building and education. So for me, this is this kind of collaborative effort that could just give guidance to, some kind of new thinking about education. But definitely we will have to, so let me just tell you a few words about what will happen after summer. So in September, I will try to propose the next steps for this group and try to create some kind of, perhaps, to propose maybe 4 subgroups for our working group. And we would like to organize a 2-day workshop at Cornell. I still didn't secure funding for inviting 30 people to Cornell. So I will probably send a survey to all of you to check if some people could use their research funds for visiting Cornell for 2 days. So we will try to work out the budget, and I hope that maybe Ploshes Fund will help us to organize this kind of event related to education, since they are trying to do some new initiatives about field buildings and issues related to nuclear weapons. If we don't manage to organize the workshop in person, just because we will not secure enough funds, I think we're going to organize 4 sessions for different subgroups to discuss issues a little bit more in details. And maybe each group could, produce some kind of initial recommendations or conceptual paper that we can then put together into one piece here at the REPI Institute and send for comments to everyone. So we will try to think about more specific working methods on how to advance work of this group. But what you can expect this week, it will be the recordings from both sessions, so people can maybe send me some additional comments. Otherwise, I will be summarizing the discussion during the summer and contacting all of you in early September, suggesting some next steps. So if this sounds fine to you, thank you for today. Thank you so much for your participation. It was a very exciting discussion to hear so many different voices. And I hope to see you soon. I hope you have a great summer.